listening to the Millennial's Choice Show, Canada's most trusted podcast on all things real estate, finance, and entrepreneurship. Here's your host, Matthew Ablacan.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Millennial's Choice Real Estate, Finance, and Entrepreneurship podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Ablacan, and I'm with my brother from the same mother.
What's going on, guys?
And today we got a special guest in the house. Today's topic is going to be about entrepreneurship, and we're going to learn a lot from Jonathan Harvey. What's going on, Jonathan?
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Good.
What's going
good.
on, man?
Thanks for being on.
Do you tell every guest that they're special, by the way?
Listen, I do, but I don't do it. I'm a nice guy. I don't do it to blow smoke. I feel like you are special.
Yeah,
though.
no, I think every one of us is special, so I appreciate
I was
it.
gonna say,
Yeah.
I think everybody is
Yeah.
special. They have their own uniqueness, which is amazing.
Good start. Good
That's
start,
what they
boys.
taught us in teachers college. Every child is special. And then the follow-up question is, so how do you make sure you create a learning environment for that child? And the real answer is you can't, because you have 120 students per semester. But the answer to get you an A+ in teachers college in university here in Ontario, you guys, is every child is unique. Therefore, your teaching style must be unique. That was the,
Wow,
that was
this
the
guy
answer.
knows the script.
That was the
eh?
answer.
Did you go to
in
teachers college?
Yeah.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Because you do all this other stuff in entrepreneurship that you're successful with. Why'd you waste your time down that line?
I ask myself this question every single day. No, but in all seriousness, okay, I'll get into that, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention we're trying to get to 100,000 downloads by the end of 2024. Help us get there. Download this episode, share with your family and friends. And a lot of you guys listening, you want to get into business. You want to learn how to make it and be successful. But the key ingredient to success is failure. So we're going to talk about failure today, a little bit about failure, a little bit about success. If you like the episode, leave us a comment and a review, and let's get right into it. So my university span was 5 years. My undergrad was law and society, but I did that concurrently with teachers college. At the time, the teachers college program at York University was the hardest to get into. Like 1,200 or so teachers applied every year. They only accepted like 200 to 300. So I was part of that concurrent program. You get a lot of experience and it's very, very valuable. But I never applied to a school board. I never applied for any job. I don't even know how to do that. Because when I was in university, I got into real estate. I bought my first condo. I was 19. So I had that real estate bug. I knew that's what I wanted to do. I just really didn't like this. Like even during my volunteer placements, you remember because he was my student. He was in grade 12.
Yeah.
I was a student teacher.
My luck, bro. Out of all
That's
the high
jokes.
schools and all
That's
the
just like,
classes,
what?
this guy had to come show up in my big
That's
year, grade
jokes.
12. But no, it was funny though. It was hilarious.
Yeah, but you know what? To go back to your question, part of me, when I immediately graduated, I was like, this is such a waste of time. What a waste of time it was. What a waste of money it was. And then, you start realizing that you did learn a lot of valuable skills and research and networking. I think if I bring it down to those 2 points, university was all that for me. Talking to people, meeting people. I made some of my biggest mistakes, even in business, with people from university.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. I think that sort of holds true for a lot of post-secondary education because whether you go to Harvard, MIT, or your local community college, the education is not, if you're learning one particular field, it's not so substantially different because a lot of it is objective, right? Like if you're learning math or you're learning science or you're learning whatever your major might be, a lot of it is objective, right? So you may have better teachers at better schools, but the reality is you're getting a lot of the same information. But why do those people do so much better? It's because of the network. It's really what it comes down to in most cases.
Grant Cardone says that. He goes, if my kids want to go to university, they're going to go to the best school. I'm going to pay for them to get in. And I don't give a shit about what they do in terms of their grades. I just want them to network with the Obamas and the Clintons and whoever, right? So there's value in there for sure. My degrees are in that closet right there.
Nice.
On the floor.
Yeah.
And so can I go and be a teacher? Sure. But do I like to educate? Yes. And this is one of the ways we do it. So I just didn't like the school system itself. Like when I was volunteering at his school, I didn't even, not one day in a full school year did I ever have lunch at the staff room. I left every single day. Even if I went in my car and I ate my lunch.
Damn. That's kind of sad, but kind of funny.
It's weird though, because it sounds like the environment was just poison, right? Like it was just one of those things you just didn't want to be around.
Well, I'll put it to you this way. The year that I was there and then left, multiple divorces happened. multiple teachers got caught together and cheating on their spouses. I don't want to say, but one teacher was he was single and he was dating one chick and got someone else pregnant at the school.
Good for him.
Not the students, the teachers.
Yeah, no. That's a very different line. That's
that's someone who I had asked about real estate information because he used to be a realtor, a salesperson, and I was getting my license that year. Got kicked out for touching a student, harassing a student. So my point being is that we have this image of people built up in our minds. Doctors are perfect. Teachers must be perfect. Police officers are this. And I think that we fail to realize that there are good and bad apples in every industry, just like realtors. I'll be the first one to say most realtors are bad realtors and should never have their license. But that's the truth in every single profession. And so as a student teacher, I had favorite teachers in that school because I attended that school too. And those were gone right away because I saw the human side of them.
Right.
That you don't see as a student. You just see them for 40 minutes and you're done. And you just see them in the role of an educator, authority, but you don't see them as who they are as a human. And Khabib Nurmagomedov was being interviewed by Patrick Bet-David. They have a solid interview. I watched it start to finish. And he said, you guys worry about your kids and have these issues with them when they're in their teens. But what do you think? You leave them in a school with people that you might not ever want to have a conversation with. And they're the ones that are filling your kids' brains up with everything. And then you wonder why they become rebellious and stuff. Look at who are teaching them. Look at the people that are teaching them. So I saw that side firsthand. So I never applied to the school board or anything. And by the time I graduated, I was already a realtor. I already had my first 2 properties. And I was like, this is really what I want to do.
Yeah. But
I'm going to bring an education-based approach to my business.
Yeah, no, I think that's commendable. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's kind of it's a rite of passage if you're an entrepreneur to figure things out and to fail and to sort of just find your way because it's an uncharted path for you in most cases. But then at some point you do want to give back. You do want to educate. You do want to sort of impart the knowledge on other people. And being a part of the current educational system is not the best way to do it. I totally agree. And I think the thing is, you weren't even interested in it. So you're going to be regurgitating information, some of which you wouldn't even agree with, especially these days now that they've mixed DEI into everything. You know what I mean? And then, the reality is you got to follow a path you really wanted to in real estate. And now you get to kind of do the same thing, whether it's via this show or just, however else you can educate people. So I think it's nice that you get to satisfy that part of you. But I don't blame you one bit for not joining the educational system. I mean, it's a complete disaster. And I mean, I think the reality, like you said, there's great people in every industry and there's terrible people in every industry. And if you look at the numbers, it's like 90-10 in every industry. You know what I mean? So it is tough though when you pull the curtain back and you kind of see what's going on. And I think we've had a lot of that over the last couple of years with just how our entire country runs. You know what I mean? Yeah. Not just the police, not just teachers, not just literally everything. So no, I give you credit for kind of being ahead of the curve there. Good for you.
It's interesting because I was talking to a friend from high school about this the other day about our high school teachers and how there were some that left really good impressions on us. And then there were some that were just awful people. Looking back now as we're adults, we're the same age they were probably when they were teaching us. And I was like to my friend, I'm like, man, I would never talk to, kids younger than me now the way they spoke to us, as like inferiors. Right. And even when it came to things like, you're asking a teacher something, we had a teacher, miss, what does that mean? Can you explain that more? Can you explain that to us? Break it down? Google it. That was her answer.
Damn.
Can you just Google it?
That's a great out.
Can you Google it? No, I think that was a ridiculous out because at least have the common sense to read the material you're teaching to kids and have some sort of BS answer ready. Wow. Don't just say Google. Why don't you Google it and tell us what you found on Google? Looking back, I wish I said that to her because those people are just that 90% like you're talking about where they're in it because they don't know what else to do. And they're just ruining it for people because guess what? I loved biology before that. Yeah. After that class, I hated biology. I never got into biology again because I had a miserable time with that teacher because the way I don't learn by making notes off a what's it called? Overhead projector. Yeah. I don't learn like that. So for me, I'm just trying to rush and get the notes down. By the time we're done making the notes, the class is over. Okay, go read the notes at home.
It was just a job to her.
Yeah. It was just a job, and she didn't even do, half-ass it. I think she just didn't even fake her way. But to wrap that up, it's scary putting your kids into a system where you don't know the people that are going to be there interacting with them, for 8 hours a day, 9 hours a day. And me and my brother have talked about this a lot when it comes to our kids. What are we going to do with them?
I am not putting my kids in a traditional education system.
Yeah.
Fuck this place. There is no
It's
chance,
mostly you
dude.
doing the talking. I already told you, Danny.
Yeah.
I already told you what I'm doing. It's either homeschool or a really good private school.
Yeah, same.
And either way, and it's probably going to be a really good private school.
Private school, I think,
but
is the way
I don't
to
even
go.
think it's a question anymore. Like, it's
no.
It's really bad. And you know what? Do you remember because we lived at home, so we'd go, when I had to go to the school, we'd drive there.
Yeah.
So you'd come with me.
Yeah.
You remember one day that teacher, do you remember this? Where I don't want to drop his name, but we come out of the car, he had parked his car, and we come out and I'm like, hey, good morning, whatever. And he's like, this, and you're like, what the heck's wrong with him? You said that? You know who I'm talking about?
I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. He's like, remember? And you're like, what did you say? You're like, what the heck's wrong with that guy? And I'm like, he treated me like this from day one, all the time. He just very bad attitude, poor attitude towards me. And my response to Danny was, listen, for all you know, someone close to him just got cancer and he got the diagnosis and he doesn't want to say good morning. Don't take it personal. I don't know the guy. He doesn't know me.
That's nice of you, because eventually, like, if a guy was a dick for like a couple months, I'd be like, hey, fuckface, like, what's up, man? Because I'm just that kind of, like, I'm going to try to pull this out of you to not be a dickhead. You know what I mean? Especially if it's an environment that I have to be a part of. But I think that's one of the nice things about being an entrepreneur is we don't really jump into environments that we can't control anymore. And I don't mean like, hey, I have to be the boss. I have to be in control. It's not what I'm talking about. It's just you want to be around like-minded people that operate on the same level as you.
Yeah.
So if you're going through something and something happened, you'd be like, hey, man, this happened. Cool, I'll leave you alone. You're not just going to cold shoulder me and be a dick for months. You know what I mean? Because like I don't want to be, you never want to go into a situation, especially on a daily basis, where you feel uncomfortable. You feel like you're not wanted and you feel like there's going to be friction. You know what I mean? You just don't want that. And I feel like a lot of people don't have these choices. When you go there and teachers are going to be a dick, or this one's cheating on that one, or whatever's happening, and you're eating lunch in your car. You know what I mean? Like, what a terrible existence.
I didn't have a choice. And you know what's crazy is that was one of my better placements. The last year placement, I actually got kicked out of my placement because my last year placement, when you do this program, is you're teaching full time.
Right.
And this department head, which I could tell right away when I walked into the room with the other teachers, like they kind of looked down on me too because they didn't like him. And he was a total beta. We saw right away, like, hey guys, like, that water bottle's out of place. Like, who did that? Like, he'd go out of his way. Can someone restock the paper and the printer? Like, you freaking restock it. Who gives a shit? You're all part of the same team.
It's all petty nonsense.
Yeah, pettiness.
Yeah,
so I'd see that and I'd be like, oh my gosh, these people think I'm not cool. And I'm really cool. Like, I want to be their friends. I don't want to be his friend. And he'd get me to photocopy his shit all the time. I never taught. So you start university September, exams are December. First week you're done in December. And I remember November, I still hadn't taught yet. So I'm 21 and I'm still hot-headed, whatever. And this guy goes, I'm in real estate now for 2 years and I'm having a bad morning, but I have to go to the school. So I wear jeans. First day I wear jeans. God forbid. He's such a bad example for the students. So he nitpicks the jeans, actually. Then he asked me to get him an orange juice, which I did. Then he goes, I need you to photocopy these like lesson plans, whatever. I haven't taught anything yet. Now I want to be there to teach. I want to learn, make my mistakes. And I just go to him. Nobody knows I'm in real estate because you can't tell a teacher, oh, you have another side job or profession, right? And he goes, so he asked me to photocopy the lesson plans and I just go to him. I go, I know how to use the photocopier. I go, I have this giant photocopier in my office. It's state of the art. Photocopy lots of stuff for my business. I go, I need to be teaching. He goes, is there something wrong? Are you having like a bad day or whatever? I'm like, no, but it's November. I'm about to start my exams and I haven't taught one day. And like, this is half the year is gone basically. He sends me home. By the time I got home, there was an email to my coordinator saying that, I was aggressive. I had threatened him. He doesn't want to continue with the placement. This is bad news because if I don't finish my placement, I don't graduate university. I can't graduate from my undergrad. It's concurrent. You have to do it at the same time.
Right.
So my coordinator goes, what happened? I explained it to him. He's like, why didn't you tell me ahead of time, whatever? I go, really? Like, do I have to complain about it? Like, it is what it is. Because what these guys do is they get a student teacher and then they kind of screw off for that time that they have a student teacher. Mm-hmm. So I just remember telling my coordinator, I'm like, bro, I don't care if you have to get me a placement in Timmins, Ontario. I'm graduating this year. Point of the story, he gets me a placement. Worst school in the Toronto District School Board, high school. He's like, you got to go there and you'll start in January. My first day goes as follows. The supervisor meets with me. Mr. Andrews, shout out to Mr. Andrews. He's probably retired now, so it doesn't matter if I share this story. He was a very, very old man, but very kind man. And he goes, showing me around the school. And then all of a sudden he goes, just wait 1 second. We're in the stairwell and kids are going to the classes. He yells at a chick who's going, he's like, aren't you supposed to be at home? You're suspended. She's like, fuck you, Mr. Andrews. He's like, no, fuck you. And he just, I kid you not, I'm tripping. And he's like, and I don't curse. I'm just telling you a story. And he just goes, she's a nice kid though. He just says that, turns around and say, I'm like, why is she suspended? He goes, she tried to stab another girl with scissors.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, that'll do it. Yeah.
Worst school. And I share this story because the life of an entrepreneur is a roller coaster. I have a painting in the other room that symbolizes that. You won't see it because it's on this side of the wall. And every time I drive by on the 400, I drive by the old 400 and Finch where the old Humber River Hospital used to be.
Yep.
The school's right behind it.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, there's a police station across the street and all that. If I'm having a really bad day, I drive by, I look at that school, I go, nothing was worse than that school. That year of my university.
That's it, man. Life gives you lessons. It's like it calluses your mind. It makes you more capable.
Yes.
You fight through those things and you're like, I can get through anything. You know what I mean? And it's funny though, but like to sort of go back to the education thing, I think you're actually seeing a big rise in young families, young entrepreneurs especially, and actually just a lot of people that are just more centered politically or right wing, depending how you want to look at it, that are just like, hey, the current educational system is basically abusive in a different way. You know, it's ideological. They're not really teaching kids what they need to learn anymore. And let's be honest, like, what did you really learn in public school besides learning how to count to 10 and the alphabet? You know, I'm obviously being a little facetious, but you know what I mean? It's more just about kind of figuring yourself out. And now that they're kind of drowning these kids in this ideological crap, you just go like, first of all, the education wasn't overly practical, but you know what? They're socializing. So you go, it's okay. And then they start adding in this ideological stuff, and then they stop reprimanding children for anything. Kids are not wrong no matter what they do. And now they're trying to convert these kids in this horrific way at such a young age for all this gender stuff. And I don't want to go too deep down that line. I guess my problem with it is though, you know, we don't trust kids to get tattoos when they're young. We don't trust kids to do, you can't vote, you know,
you can't drink,
you can't
Drive
smoke, you can't do it. And it's because we don't trust their judgment. We don't allow them to, you know, and there's obviously there should be major laws continuing to be in place for having sex with minors. I know that's getting into a weird space, but anyway.
Maps.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, right? But anyway, my point being, there's this one thing that they decide that kids apparently have the wherewithal to make to figure these things out, and it has to do with their gender. And you go, this is going to ruin their lives forever. You know, What are we doing? And this is now in schools. So for me, that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, and I think it was for a lot of other people too. So I think what you're going to see is a strong competitive sort of force from people like us pushing back, building more private schools, educating our kids at home, whatever that looks like. You know what I mean? There's all these groups now where you go to small towns, there's like 30, 40 kids now, and the parents kind of get together and they sort of pool their resources. Or, you know, I got a buddy that I did some work with in the past building casinos, and he's got 2 private schools now in Oakville. And he's like, hey, Jonathan, it's pretty easy. So we're actually looking at maybe even building one depending where we land when our kids are old enough. You know what I mean? But I think it's good. Like, I think if there's a strong enough competitive push from that side of the market, first of all, our kids are going to get a better education. They're going to get a STEM-focused education. They're going to be outside. They're going to learn about taxes. They're going to learn about all the things that are really important, things that we wish we learned. Because what do you want to do for your kids? At the end of the day, you want to give them the tools that you learned way later in life, much earlier. You want to give them a leg up, right? And this is a good way. So that will happen. And I'm hopeful that once that happens, there's enough of a push in sort of the private school arena, for lack of a better term, that the traditional educational system goes, hey, we need to make some changes here or we're no longer competitive. So it's like that might sort of balance the scales. I'm hopeful that it does, but I don't know. But as far as I'm concerned, my kids are definitely going to some alternative school for sure.
Do you think, on that note, and I agree with everything you just said, do you think though that'll make it more accessible for the general public? Like, for example, if you have an immigrant family, you know, they have kids and they don't want their kids to be immersed into this, you know, public school system where they're teaching them all these different things, blah, 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 and they want to take them to private school but can't afford it. Do you think that's gonna play a huge role in making it more affordable for those families that want to bring their kids into private school?
Yeah, I mean, for two reasons I do. First, I think when there's more options in the market, it always drives the price down. It sort of commoditizes things, right? So definitely it will be more accessible. I think the other reason is because people like me, I'm not trying to pump my own tires, but I would build a private school as like an NGO. Like I wouldn't want it to be profitable. I'd want it to be, basically a system where all the money that goes into the school only goes towards the kids. You don't make decisions to put money on your bottom line. You only do it for them because that's why we're here. And I think there's going to be enough support for that. I think some people make decisions about how they kind of want to, how they want to run a business. You look at private school, you go, hey, there's big money there. You look at the fund they have at Harvard, it's billions and billions of dollars. They just have it sitting there. So they look at it as a business, right? That's not how I want to see education. I want to see it like, hey, all you want to do is break even no matter what. All the money goes into the tools for the kids. And it's funny, a lot of times people go, oh, well, yeah, that's like, why would you want to do that? Or, hey, that's some sort of idealistic idea. It's actually not. So my wife works for an NGO. What I learned while she's been there is that they have an abundance of resources. Everyone has all the tools they need, and they prioritize the infrastructure. It's actually a really, really great system when you're not trying to turn a profit. And I can't think of a better cause that people would put their money towards other than providing the right education for their kids and not worrying about a profit, because at the end of the day, 99% of people involved in it are just going to throw their 5 to 10 grand down anyway every year just to put their kids in the system, right? So for me, I think if you run it like an NGO, I think you open up a lot more opportunity to provide for kids that maybe don't have the money to be there, but deserve to be there. So through some sort of application process, you give them the opportunity and then they can get access to that education.
Thank you. And can we unpack a little bit about what you said regarding the schools being a business? Because I learned this later in life after I actually graduated from university, at York University studying business. I learned that, the system is set up in a way as a business, not necessarily caring about the people going in there, but just trying to turn a profit.
This is a finance show, and we talked about this on one of our last podcasts. I literally maybe shouldn't have done it, but I really name dropped certain people at certain universities that are crying and playing the victim card right now that they are losing money because Doug Ford cut off a bunch of what did they call them?
Subsidies or something?
Subsidies. And just kind of incentives that they would give these universities. And they're saying that literally because of those cuts, the education to the kids are going to be affected. Meanwhile, these are the same organizations that are pushing strongly to our federal government to bring more immigrants and international students because they charge them a lot more for the same education that someone in Canada can access. And if that's not a business to you, I don't know what is. And you guys need to be aware of this.
I can run some numbers for you on that.
Run it.
You know how much money, take a guess, how much money annually foreign students bring in tuition alone to colleges and universities in Canada?
100 million.
Yeah.
$16 billion a year.
I wasn't even close.
A year.
And
the cutoff that the government made was, and so in addition to that, there's another 7.2 or 7.3 billion that goes into the economy in terms of support, where they're living, buying food and stuff like that. And what the Stats Canada said was that it contributed 218,000 jobs to Canada, having those people here. And now the government of Canada is cutting off 35% of that.
Yes.
That's a big jump. That makes a huge difference. You're effectively taking over $7 billion out of the economy. But I guess I get it though. You have to limit immigration. You have to curb this immigration. But my question is, was that the right place to do it? And here's the thing: when you want people to emigrate to your country, you want them to contribute to society. That's the whole idea. Look, come here and contribute. Like, I don't care. Like, I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember this, but there was this big thing about immigrants taking people's jobs. Oh, the immigrants are here coming and taking our jobs.
Yeah.
Now, this was a big, 10, 15 years ago, right? And I think it had been going on for a lot longer, but I remember the conversation being pretty strong at that point. That was sort of the pushback point. But now, no one's complaining about that because now you're bringing in people that don't have any skills and can't contribute to society. And I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just being honest. Like, these people, the threshold to enter the country is now super low. You don't actually have to be able to do anything when you're here. So are we sure that limiting the students that are coming here to get educated, that are just actually pumping money into the system, into the economy for Canadians, are we sure that was the right place to curb immigration?
I hear what you're saying and I agree with it all. Here's the thing about those students though. A lot of them were taking bullshit programs just to be able to come here.
Sure.
So there has to be some sort of threshold. Like,
but what? Okay, so
like a Nigerian student. We literally just went through this with a tenant
Sure.
application. Super wealthy, family is really wealthy in Nigeria. Comes here, going to a college. What's the program? Food and nutrition. I'm not saying there's no value in that program. I'm just saying that they're not really coming here to study food and nutrition.
excuse me, there's not much.
You know what I mean? Like, if you want to bring students that want to be lawyers, doctors, dentists, teachers, police officers, whatever, trades, the same way we want to bring a skilled immigrant, the same way we're going to argue and say, we have my parents are immigrants. We have no problem saying bring immigrants to the country, but bring qualified immigrants or laborers or skilled trades is the same way I think we should hold the students accountable.
See, I have to disagree in one sense, and I agree and disagree. So I agree in the sense that
get off the show. No,
you got to go, dude. So I disagree in the fact that, like, if you look at the type of immigrants we're bringing in today, and I think someone can fact check me, but I think I'm pretty close. 6 out of 10 people immigrating to Canada today cannot find steady work for 2 years. 6 out of 10 cannot find steady work, which means they're dependent on the government, which means you and I have to pay people, have to give them money just to stay here. And all they're really doing is it's a voting factory for the liberals. And that's a fact. There's data from 40 years looking into that. That is factual. So that's it. People can say whatever they want. Go look at the study. It was done in America. For every 1% of growth in immigrants, you have a decline of 0.42% for Republican votes. Fact. So it's a numbers game for the liberals. That's just what it is, right? Where I kind of agree is it's like, yeah, obviously, sorry, to just get back to that point. So when you look at sort of immigration, you're like, okay, well, those are the people we're bringing in, right? And what I'm saying is, if you have to pick and choose who you're going to bring in and who you're not, I would rather bring in people that are young and ambitious and getting educated, whether it's in food and nutrition or whatever, that can contribute money to society. Because if they're here, look, I'm being somewhat, what's the word? Like selfish for Canada. But like, if you look at the alternative, it's the immigrants who can't find work for 2 years, right? And look, this isn't their fault necessarily. It's Canada's fault for not having the infrastructure and not creating the proper system to actually implement before you bring people in. So I don't necessarily think it's on them. But if you look at one versus the other, you have immigrants that cost the country money for at least 2 years and can't find steady work, or you find students that can contribute part of this $16 billion a year in tuition plus another 7 and change to the economy. Sure, they may not be contributing much beyond that, but if you have to pick between the two, who are you picking?
I'm not saying limit the number of students. What I'm saying is keep the number of students the same, but maybe bring a certain level of requirement in terms of what programs are you coming to study here. That's kind of what I'm saying. And then my counter argument to the other side of this, the 6 out of 10 can't find stable jobs. Why is that? What are they qualified to do? Because I look at every restaurant that I go into, they're all hiring, whether it's a Subway, a Pizza, or a fine dining restaurant.
Right.
So, but like, where are they skilled at? And here's the thing: are they being incentivized to work and find work?
Because they're being paid money
because the tenants that we are, and the thing why they're tenants is, most of them, they cannot, first of all, buy property because they're banned. Foreign buyers are banned.
Yeah, till 2027 now.
Yeah,
they just extended it.
They just extended it.
Yeah, I think I read a little deeper. I think they either just extended it or they're proposing to extend it. Either way, it's going to get extended.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say was, a lot of immigrants, when they first come to a country, they choose to rent because they want to first see if they're going to assimilate properly.
I get it. I would do the same thing. We were thinking about moving to the States or moving to Cayman or something. You're going to rent. 100%. I was like, hey, let's try somewhere for 6 months to a year and see what we like.
And that's you, someone who's learned here, speaks the language, things like that. But they're getting comfortable. And they're getting comfortable because of the tenants we're dealing with. Man, some of them are willing to give 6 months in advance. Some of them are willing just to do first and last, and they have the money that they're getting. They're getting like $10K just to furnish their place.
That's wild.
$10K plus money each month.
That's what I mean. So it's like you look at you pick and choose, and you go, well, it makes more sense to not cap students, and it would make then rather instead cap this rampant immigration of people that don't meet a certain threshold and can't contribute to society. That's kind of my point. And the reason that I agree with you on the educational stuff is that I think that system itself is broken. I think that we're basically robbing kids blind and putting them in debt for a very long time for a piece of paper that actually can't contribute much to their lives. It's relatively insignificant, and the education becomes old pretty quick. Like your teacher said, Google it, you learn more, to be honest with you.
I'm not going to say the grade because he's probably still teaching. but just below grade 8 and just above grade 4, somewhere in between. This teacher told me that I'd end up bagging his wife's groceries in front of the whole class at no frills for the rest of my life, or her makeup at Shoppers Drug Mart. Yeah, because I was one of the 3 Iraqi kids, and those other 2 Iraqi kids, okay, they were bad kids, I get it, but I wasn't a bad kid, honestly. I was so quiet. I was always an introvert. And he just put me in that group. He put me in that group and he said it. And buddy, that was one of my blind spots for years. I had no idea that was influencing how I behaved, and specifically how I behaved towards achievement, because I just wanted to prove him wrong. But I was so young that I didn't really realize that it was there.
Yeah.
But who says that to a kid?
That's pretty racist, actually.
That is really racist.
Sorry, that's
And
pretty
first of
horrible.
all,
Yeah.
Whose wife buys makeup at Shoppers Drug Mart?
And then needs it to be bagged. Yeah, it's like, we're good, man. You got to bring your own bags these days.
I wanted to shift gears real quick and talk about Blender News.
Yeah.
So that's your company, right?
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of stuff happening in the world. I know you're dialed into this, so I wanted to ask you the Emergencies Act and how the federal, courts ruled that, it was unconstitutional,
Yep.
right? What's happening with that? Is Trudeau going to jail or like?
No, nothing will happen, right? So the problem is, in general, look at it more from a macro level. So politicians created a system where they don't have to be qualified to take the job, and there's zero accountability no matter how much money they spend or the things they do wrong in our society, because they know how to safeguard themselves. And even if you look at like the election interference that's going on right now, the foreign interference, so they're doing a public inquiry. Well, it's actually not a public inquiry, right? So it's a private inquiry. They're holding behind closed doors. Conservatives and NDP don't get access to all the information, only what the public gets. So the only people that actually have access to it are liberals, and they gave standing to other people from China to actually be a part of it. So now there's groups like the, I forget the name. It's a human rights group from China. I apologize. They're basically, according to Canada's definition of genocide, they fall under that category within China. So, but they're afraid to speak. They basically boycotted it. They're like, hey, we're not going to speak at this inquiry because this is going to get back to China and we're all going to pay the price. And my point in saying that, like, I didn't really need to go down that line, but my point in bringing this up is, even when our government, when our prime minister knowingly allows foreign interference in the elections to his benefit, it's a banana republic, to his benefit, he goes, well, we're not going to hold an inquiry because it's not that important. Then they go, oh, you need to do something. Okay, well, I'm going to appoint the person. Oh, it's a family friend. They say it's no big deal. And then they go, that's not good enough. Okay, well, we'll hold a real public inquiry. I'll appoint the judge and then we'll do it in private. There is no accountability for these people, right? There's no accountability for Trudeau. The only thing this is going to stop is him implementing it again in a position like that. So if there was another trucker convoy, they wouldn't implement it. It just wouldn't happen because there'd be such a big pushback. And it is a bit like, it's a bit of vindication for people that were a part of it, for sure. But that's all you're going to get. You're not going to get any retribution, really. And he's not going to really pay the price. It's not the way our system works. It's broken, unfortunately.
Well, a little while, just to interject, like just a little while ago, Biden, it came out that he willfully had those documents in his possession.
Yep.
And that he, willfully gave them back afterwards and willfully allowed the authorities to search his home. And that was so different from, Trump holding them and making a fuss out of them, and then the Mar-a-Lago thing. And it's like, he admitted to it, but yet the charges were up.
Well, did you see why?
Yeah.
Did you see what they said?
Yeah.
Because he's an elderly man with a bad memory.
What?
No, but they didn't say it like that.
Dude,
no.
where's? I'll show you.
This is what they said.
There's
no,
a
it's
quote.
worse.
Yeah.
It's worse. They said that the reason he forgets is because he gets asked so many questions,
dude,
and probably the elderly stuff.
So the guy in the report literally said that their quote was that he's an elderly man with a poor memory. They're like, why wouldn't you put him on trial? Because he goes, the jury will see this the same way as us because he's an elderly man with a poor memory.
Yeah,
like that was the.
But why does he have a poor memory? Because he gets asked a lot of questions, and he, obviously by getting asked a lot of questions, you'll probably forget some stuff.
Bro, he forgot about his son dying. He forgot about being parts of being vice president. This is recent memory. Like, I've had loved ones pass away. I'll never forget that. Well, obviously not in my current state of mind. When you start to lose it, yeah, you're out of touch with reality. Bro, the dude is so compromised. This is ridiculous. But it is crazy that there's a different set of rules. They're like, well, he admitted it and we feel bad because he's an old man. So no big deal. Trump's almost as old. Like what are we doing here? And I'm not a supporter of either one of them, to be honest with you. But again, it just goes to show the Western world and how we run our political system is that there's no accountability. It doesn't matter. When you're in a position of power, you can do whatever you want. Doesn't matter how tyrannical it is. We just kind of don't bat an eye and we let it go. But like here, look, when you see what's happening in Canada and in the United States right now with politics, it's being run like a banana republic, right? So the United States is objectively utilizing the DOJ, like the Department of Justice and whatever weapons they have against the leading candidate for president, the opposing party. They're trying to put him in jail using their system. That is a banana republic. In Canada, we just do it a bit of a different way, right? We capture the media, we capture the regulatory, we capture healthcare, we do all these things, and we don't let anybody say any of the stuff that we're saying at scale. So you just can't get any other messages out. It's the same thing. You're stifling free speech. Everything's state controlled. So same idea. The political landscape is an absolute nightmare. So to your point with the Emergencies Act, look, it's good, like I said, that people get vindicated, and now there's some people that are going to run these civil suits to try to sue the government for freezing their bank accounts and stuff. But will anything ever happen to Trudeau? No, nothing will ever happen. The guy's going to try to run again in 2025, and honestly, I think there's a 50-50 chance he wins, which is dark.
Wow, that is dark.
But why'd you launch Blender Media?
Because there is a major lack of independent news in the world right now, especially in Canada. It's interesting. You look at the States, and they're very polar in their politics, right? Left goes for the left, right goes for the right. And there's extremes on both sides, for sure. So I don't really support either one in their extremities. And I actually think there's good value in both sides, generally. So when you look at that, though, there's representation in the media on both sides. There are definitely more mainstream sources on the left, probably 3-1, 4-1, but there is representation on the right, right? Now, if you look at Canada, there's no real conservative representation. You have a little bit in the National Post, a little bit, but that's really it. And they're still pretty careful. And they're actually rather opinionated about some things where they should be a little more objective, but whatever, that's fine. So the reason I started Blender was, I was like, look, there's a major gap in this space. There's a lot of policy there are a lot of pieces of legislation that have been passed in the last couple of years in Canada that have stifled free speech. C11, C18, and now C36 is coming. And it stops online platforms from being able to share the news that you and I would want to see. In fact, you can't share any news in Canada anymore on social platforms. Well, Facebook and Instagram, which are the primary tools. So that's part of it. But then also the way that the government has captured media by subsidizing them. So like every major media platform is getting paid by the government, right? In one way or another. And it's that old adage, you don't bite the hand that feeds you. So no one's really telling it like it is. And I understand that I have my blind spots and my biases, but I tell people that. So if you look at, if you subscribe to Blender News and you get our daily newsletter, like I personally write this every day. I tell you what's going on in the world. I look at both sides. I try to be objective as possible. And then I share my thoughts, but I say our thoughts. Here's what I think. That means that it's speculative. You know what I mean? At least I'm telling you, hey, here's how I'm trying to wrap this up to make sense of it. But this is just my opinion. This is not a fact. Sometimes I'll use facts to prove my opinions, but that's about as far as I go. I just think there's a real gap in providing people with the truth these days. They're getting one narrative in Canada that is this sort of liberal megaphone media that just sort of, takes whatever the government says and runs with it so they can keep their business alive. And look, I understand it. It's life or death, right? Because if the conservative government gets in, they're going to defund a lot of this stuff. CBC shuts down. All these media funds like the, I think it's C18, that is taking $100 million a year from Google. So about 70 million of those dollars are going directly to small media platforms. But not just any small media platform, not me, because you have to apply to a government agency that then basically researches what you do and what you report on, and then they approve you or you get disapproved. You know where I would land. So basically anybody that's getting access to this $70 million a year, these people are already towing the liberal line. So here's the way I look at media in Canada. They own the mainstream media. That's the highway, right? And now with this other $70 million a year that's coming in annually, that's not costing taxpayer dollars, that's going right to these small media platforms. Well, those are all the side streets. Now those are liberal too. How the hell do you get the other word out anymore if people don't stand up, push back, and create these kinds of platforms or companies?
But here's the thing. Someone on the outside will look at you and say, yeah, but you're just trying to do the same thing, but for the other side. So my question to you would be, let's say you get a conservative candidate who says something that's really appalling.
Sure.
Puts a policy in place that's really anti-freedom, anti-free speech, whatever. Would you call them out on it on Blood
I just
News?
did. I do it all the time, man. I shred Doug Ford all the time. I think he's an asshat.
Dougie?
Yeah, he is. Sorry, man. You know what? The worst thing is he might even lose the next election, and the only thing we have is going to be a liberal. That's going to be even worse. He is not doing a great job, and he's so corrupt. Like, are you kidding me? The Greenbelt deal? Dude, you couldn't hide that any better? Are you okay? Like, what are you talking about? So I've called him out for several things. I called him out for something yesterday, which is he's not going to follow Alberta's policy changes on gender ideology. Look, we've had this conversation already. Stop mutilating children. Stop making them sterile when they're fucking 12 years old. It's not a decision you can make at that age. And you cannot reverse these things. I don't care what people say. It's the same thing they use to chemically castrate pedophiles. This is not something you get over. Like, oh, I'm going to change my mind. No, you're not. It's not going to happen. You're ruining these kids' lives. You should be putting policy in place. So that and then the other thing, another one rather, I should say, is, I went at Pierre Poilievre the other day. So there's this new act coming in. The intention, it's another surveillance act or censorship act, I should say. Sorry. They're implementing it. It's working its way. It's gone through the Senate already through its first 3 readings, and it's twice through the House. And I forget the name of it. I apologize, but I'll explain what it is. It's to stop kids from watching porn online. That's the idea. I'm actually good with that. I'm for that. Except that's not what the legislation, that's not what it is. So the policy is basically implementing these roadblocks on websites all over the internet. And now to access them, what they're suggesting right now, it's not passed. What they're suggesting is you have to put in your identification to use websites. And now they want to scan your face every time you use them. I'm like, are you kidding me? To stop kids from seeing porn. First of all, the kids are going to get a VPN and watch porn anyway. So your policy is ineffective, right? So we actually know that it's just another censorship tool. And for all the websites that decide they're not going to play this game, they will be blocked in Canada. Now, again, this isn't passed yet, but this is what the bill currently says. And you know why I was complaining about Pierre? Because he's not pushing back against this. In fact, only the Liberals are, which is crazy. The NDP, the Bloc, and the Conservatives are not pushing back against this because they don't want to be seen as the party that's saying kids should watch porn.
But who proposed the bill?
It was a senator. So they're supposed to be bipartisan or nonpartisan generally. But she was appointed by Trudeau. She was appointed by Trudeau in 2018. So I forget her name. She's got a double last name, Melville something. Anyway, but again, like, yeah, I will go at anybody that's creating a problem because the reality is, look, the news that I'm creating is not about my bias. I know that I have it and I call it out. The news that I'm creating is about being logical. You know why so many people read it and talk to me about these things? Like, yeah, we see things the same way. It's not because of my opinion. It's because it's objectively logical. You just look at it and you kind of go, well, what makes the most sense here? Forget the politics. You look at gender transitioning for kids. Tell me how, based on how we treat kids, that they're the protected class, they can't vote, they can't get tattoos, they can't smoke, they can't drink. Do we think, logically, that it's okay for them to undergo gender transition surgeries and have their hormones suppressed with drugs? Do we think that's okay, logically?
Of course not.
I don't think it's okay at all.
Of course not.
Hell no.
That's logical. And then you look at this porn act and you go, well, the Conservatives are supporting it, but you go, wait a minute. What is actually happening there? And now that you know they want to scan your face and they want to block other websites that aren't willing to do it, now what seems logical? Well, get rid of it. Then you look at the policy from C18. Does it make sense that big tech companies should have to pay media companies in Canada to put their content up? Well, no, they shouldn't, because social media companies give the mainstream media, the same opportunity that you and I have. We can utilize their platform to reach the world. It's on us to get there. They shouldn't be paying us for our content. That doesn't make any sense. It's highway robbery. It's bullshit. It's basically he basically held them hostage. And he goes, if you don't do this, you're going to pay these penalties, because the fines were quite severe. So you kind of go, what's logical? Get rid of the policy. For me, everything comes down to what makes the most sense. It's not about which side the legislation comes from.
So you just said that it comes down to basically the policies, right, of the candidate, right? Mm-hmm. So when you're saying something about, let's say, a particular, like, how do you find your balance now as a media company when you're trying to give this information out to the Canadian market, to Canadians, but how do you find the balance in terms of what do you think is right for the country as a citizen of the country? Yeah. Versus your duties as a media company? And let me explain. So, like, politics for me, when you're voting, is always the lesser of two evils.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Right? Unfortunately,
great system.
that's what it is. So let's say we're in Ontario. Let's say you have these opinions about Premier Doug Ford. Election will come up. When's the election, by the way, for the province? Do you know?
No, I don't know the provincial. It's this year, I think.
Is it this year?
Well, I know. Okay, sorry. I just double check that because I don't want to. I know the federal is 2025, like October. Yeah. I don't know if it's in lockstep with that, but
well, it's okay. So whenever the election happens, now leading up to the election, we know the media companies ramp up whatever hit pieces they have on certain political figures. Right. So how do you balance that? Because if it's the choice between the lesser of two evils, and you just said a liberal candidate's going to be worse, unfortunately, how do you like balance the responsibility you have as a media company versus, you know, you wanting what's best for the province in this case?
I don't write hit pieces. So if something happens, I report on it. I'm not going to go and just be like, I don't go fabricate things. And I don't mean fabricate, sorry. I don't go stitch stories together just to make someone look bad. It's kind of like, okay, if you look at what's happening, so if you look at kind of the two parties and you had to compare them, I guess it's like, what's happening in the news that I would report on, and how is it relevant to, say, the election? So if you look at Bonnie Crombie, you can do a piece on Bonnie Crombie. You can also do one on Doug Ford. You know, I guess at the end of the day, I would probably report on a lot of what's going on in the media. I would try to balance things out to give people both sides and both perspectives. But I try to just highlight what people do that makes them unqualified or insane in these particular situations. Like if you look at Trudeau, I actually just don't like him as an individual. I don't like the guy. One of the few people that I can say I don't like. I just don't like him. Most people, I either like you or I don't think about you. I actively dislike this man. He's ruined our country. But the thing is, I don't have to just be mean about him. You know what I mean? I can just say, here's what he's doing today. And then it kind of tells its own story. You know what I mean? It's the same thing with these other leaders. You know, if you want to consider, you know, is it better to have conservatives or liberals? You got to say, like you said, it's a lesser of two evils, right? So I guess if you take this particular issue, if you say, okay, it's Doug Ford or it's going to be Bonnie Crombie, right? How would I balance that out? How would I sort of manage my bias? I would genuinely understand what both people are bringing to the table, and I would explain why I think one makes more sense than the other with just facts and information.
So even if you're let's say talking about both of those figures, both of those people, you might list like, okay, here's what Ford's done that's good.
Yeah.
Here's what he's done that's bad. Same thing for the other person.
Yes.
You decide.
Yes.
And then you'll chime in because that's what your company's all about. You'll chime in. You want to give people your bias.
Yeah.
But or your take on it. But you want to allow basically what you're saying is you want to allow people to make an informed decision.
That's how I like to
That's what
operate.
the media companies now are not doing, is what you're saying.
That's exactly it. Yeah. Thank you for saying that, because I really butchered my answer to you, but that's what I meant. Yeah.
No, I got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
What I basically meant was I try to give you all the information so you can make the best decision the best decision for yourself. But at the same time, I will maybe help you get there with sharing my thoughts, but I will let you know that that's what they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, fair enough. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you on your thoughts and opinions on certain entrepreneurs during COVID that spoke out, more specifically, zeroing in on Adamson's Barbecue. I'm sure you probably know what happened with there. Did you think he made a right call in regards to standing up for what's right, but at the same time pretty much losing all that he had? I'm not gonna act like I'm an expert on everything that happened there. From what I understand, though, he did keep his place open, and they ended up hitting him with fines and then eventually shutting him down. What's your thoughts on that? Would you ever be willing to risk it all for the sake of the people and freedom of speech, in terms of, you know, keep doing what you're doing with Blender News?
Well, I mean, I think I do that in my own way, and like I'm willing to sort of die on the hill of fighting the fights that I do, you know, with respect to free speech and trying to do what's right for Canada in general. And that's kind of what Blender represents, is me being like, hey, you know, I'm unemployable at this point. I've said too many things online that if anybody looks me up, they're like, oh yeah, not this guy. So that's okay. I've accepted that fate. You know what I mean? So I have kind of taken that plunge in a way. With Adamson's Barbecue, so we actually have the same lawyer. I know the story reasonably well. I think he did the right thing, and I appreciate what he did. I also know he comes from a reasonable amount of means, so he's not struggling. So I know he had the option to do that and not really worry too much if things fell apart. Where I think he went wrong, actually, was when they closed his property down and did give him access to it, and then he broke in through the drywall, through one of the other units to get into the unit and break in. That was where he went wrong. I think that's where it stopped. That's where they were able to make him seem radicalized, which I don't think he was. But that's when the media took it and ran with it. If he had just held a protest outside of the business at that time, instead of breaking in and getting arrested, I think he would have done way better for himself. And I think it would have had a much larger impact. And it could have been a bigger turning point had he done that, because I think he could have generated a reasonable amount of support. That being said, I appreciate anybody that's willing to stand up and push back against this tyrannical shit. And I think a lot of other Canadians should too.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. So when you look at the convoy, that was the biggest thing they addressed as well, the illegal blockade of the highways.
Yeah.
Because it could be an act of terrorism, right? And
sure.
in the context of who was doing it and whatnot, we get it. That it likely wasn't an act of terrorism. But that was the thing that they pinpointed. And so there's that balance, right? There's that balance of like between you doing something illegal because you know they're going to run with it and you standing up for what you think is right. Because sometimes this person could have stood up for something that he wholeheartedly thought was right, but it's wrong.
Yeah,
I know there's a fine line, like who defines what's right versus wrong, right? There are people in certain parts of the world that blow themselves up because they believe that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, good point. That's pretty wild.
You understand? So like it's always this balance. Like our show, if I may, like it's not just like we've had the mayor of Vaughan, we've had a conservative minister, we've had a liberal councillor, and we're reaching out to more and more. I'm working on getting someone from the Green Party, man.
Nice.
Because I want to hear their perspective.
For sure.
Like I do really want to hear their perspective, and I want to be knowledgeable enough to push back a little bit so that I know what I'm talking about.
Right.
Because I do want to see myself, I want to put myself in their shoes. Because you look at our federal government, you may not agree with a lot of things they do, and I think a lot of Canadians maybe are feeling that sentiment. But there are a portion of Canadians that are still getting impacted by the same policies. However, they do agree with what it is they're doing. You said it yourself, 50-50 on the election. There's a reason that you're saying that. I don't think you attribute the 50-50 to complete corruption. I think that there is a segment of the population that welcomes what the federal government's doing. And so there's that fine line of really trying to understand what they're doing. So like as an example, developers that Doug Ford is taking heat for because of what he did with his buddies and all that stuff. That's how they pitched it. Well, the federal government is throwing billions and billions of dollars for developers to build affordable housing.
Right.
What does affordable housing mean? Right. I don't really hear many people, especially most of those developers are conservative voters. I don't really hear them bitching and complaining about that policy. So it's like, I really want to understand where it is they're coming from. When I hear Pierre, you see those little short clips taken out of context, maybe not, but you hear them. And he's bashing the carbon tax and he's bashing this. And you look at your gas bill. I mean, I looked at my gas bill. I'm like, what the hell? And just shipping the gas to your house is one fee. And then the carbon tax on the shipping is, that's obviously infused into that. And there's a carbon tax fee that you pay on the bill.
And then you pay tax on the carbon
tax. And then you
tax.
pay tax on that, right?
That lines up.
So I would want to respectfully, politely, if I had the honor of honestly interviewing Trudeau, if I could, I would, and just say, where's the rationale for that? And see how he answers that.
He will just basically beat around the bush and not give you a straight answer. It's how he operates, unfortunately. He's the wrong guy, but I appreciate where you're coming from. I do. I think you do need to be able to take everybody's perspective in and sort of, that's the challenge with macro management. That's the challenge with running a country, right? Because the thing is, whatever is best for people of Toronto is not best for people in, say, the East Nova Scotia or in Vancouver. Like everybody needs different, or in the prairies, everybody needs different things. So when you're implementing policy, you need to be able to have these macro ideas that you implement down to your provincial leaders, and then you do it at a municipal level. We just don't run our system very well. And that's the problem. See, this is the biggest problem right now with Trudeau trying to grab more and more power, because it actually makes the country less it runs much more ineffectively. You need to be able to give people in the positions that understand how these policies affect the people in their local neighborhoods the power to actually do these things, right? And when you try to localize or centralize power at the top, you're pissing off a big portion of the country, because there's no possible way to lead that way. It's like having a CEO that wants all the power, but say he owns Shoppers Drug Mart. Well, you can't have the power over the teller in there that knows, what makeup is best for this older woman. You can't, but you want that power up here. Well, how is that woman being affected now? She's getting very poor service because you're trying to control how this person treats this woman and what they do. It's very ineffective. That's the problem with people trying to centralize and grab more and more power to the federal government. That's kind of my issue with that. To your point about understanding what's right and what's wrong, I think you have to, this is nuanced, right? Because it's not like, well, whatever people believe in is right. Obviously not. If people want to do kamikaze missions and kill themselves, that's pretty wild, right? Mm-hmm. But you say they think it's right. Okay, so I think you have to use some reasonable filters. I think you have to just be like, hey, look, you have to be logical about what you're trying to, what change you're trying to affect and why. And when you look at things that are fundamental to democracy, like what happened through COVID and through the pandemic and how they limited so many individual freedoms, you go, hey, well, that's not how this system operates. So if you're doing these things that are really against what it means to be Canadian, well, then I think we should fight those things. That seems pretty logical, right?
But here's the thing, though. What was that? Just let me interject.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean to be Canadian? Because I think where this disconnect happens is we've considered ourselves, because we're geographically located in the West, we equate ourselves to the U.S. We are not. We are not the same system.
Right.
We have been socialist a very, very long time, except the way policies are presented to us are presented differently than you would probably see in a different socialist country somewhere else, where, yeah, maybe the head of state has a lot more authority and power. What do I mean by that? Well, let's say the carbon tax. Let's just use that as an example. We might feel that that's a policy for socialists that are trying to push this climate change agenda and whatnot. But realistically, at the end of the day, like, what difference is it if they do that or they just say, stay at home? Like, at the end of the day, you're a socialist country. There are going to be socialist policies that come into your country because you are a socialist country. You don't like it, you don't have to live here. That's how I would like, maybe we're fighting for the wrong cause. Is what I'm trying to say. And just, sorry, on the carbon thing, like I just thought about it as we were talking, the tax on the tax. Well, HST tax is Ontario, right? So like at the end of the day, I don't think the prime minister was sitting in his office saying, we're going to do this and we're going to get a tax on that money's not even going to, unless I'm wrong, maybe someone could fact check me, but I'm pretty sure the HST is strictly for Ontario. So if it's such a problem, why can't the Ontario government, who's a conservative party, say, hey, you know what, on those types of bills now, on the carbon tax portion, we'll give you a rebate or whatever, because it doesn't make sense to, like, you get what I'm saying? Like, maybe things are not as simple as we think they are.
I think the HST is a harmonized sales tax, which is government, GST, and PST. So I think 5% goes to the federal government and 7% goes to the province, I believe. That's how it used to be. I think
you're right.
That's how it used to be. It used to be those two taxes. Yeah, and then they harmonized it and they just taxed it on everything. Yeah. So at the end of the day, like the difference is this: you say we're a socialist country, right? And would I agree that a lot of the things that we do would fall under that umbrella? Yes, but we're told that it's a democracy. We're not told that this is a socialist country. We're not operating under the guise that is the set of rules that are in place. So when they try to apply those, people like us have to push back so we don't get there. Because once we're there, if they go, hey guys, here's the new set of rules. This is a socialist country. Get on board. I'll go, see you later, bro. I'm out.
But what I'm saying is I think we're there already.
But the thing is we're not there. This is what's important. They're not telling Canadians that we're there. We are there. I agree. In a lot of ways, we are there. But they're still pitching this as a democracy. So as long as they're pitching it as a democracy, you have to fight to maintain that. And as they continue to encroach on it, you have to push back. That's what I think a lot of this comes down to. My big concern, and a reason why I think I talk a lot about these things, is because I am worried for where Canada is going with the high level of immigration, with all the social programs, with the coalition now between the Liberals and the self-proclaimed Socialist Party, the NDP. You look at where this is going, and now you look, okay, you make life unaffordable, right? Because that's what Trudeau is specifically doing in Canada right now, and I think it's on purpose. Make life untenable. 47% of Canadians live paycheck to paycheck right now. That's a wild figure. Like, I think it's 15 or 17% are worried about even making rent next month. Like, that's wild. You know what I mean? Like, they can't pay their bills. They can't afford. So you look at that and you go, this country is unaffordable. Trudeau is directly responsible for this. Much of it is because he printed so much money through the pandemic. But there's a lot of other reasons too. But regardless, the more unaffordable that it becomes, well, what do you need when it's unaffordable? How do you survive? Who can you depend on?
You're dependent. Yeah.
You become dependent on the government. So now they implement a universal basic income under the GLBI name, the Guaranteed Livable Basic Income, which is working through the Senate and working through the House, identical bills, which means it's going to pass in some fashion. So you look at how this country is becoming socialist. Yeah, if we start paying people to stay home and do nothing for a couple $1,000s a month, yeah, the country's ruined. I'm worried about us getting there. I think once you let that genie out of the bottle, it never goes back in. You can't start giving people $2,000 a month to survive when they need it and then take it away from them. You can't do it because it'll be pure chaos. So that's what Trudeau's going to use, in my opinion, as his soapbox to stand on for his re-election in 2025. Whatever his campaign message is, it doesn't really matter. The subtext will be, vote for me or lose your allowance. And once that happens, then you're right. This country's in real trouble because there's no way to afford that. There's no way to afford a universal basic income. I don't care what people say. I've run the numbers on it a lot of times. There's no actual way to afford this. The only way to do it is to print more money. And if you print more money, you already know what's going to happen through quantitative easing. You know what's going to happen to the economy. Except this time, the only way to solve the problem when inflation goes up and interest rates go up and everything becomes more expensive again, the only way to fix the problem is to give people more money for their monthly stipend. That's what you're going to have to do. So you get stuck in this hamster wheel. And then how are you going to solve that problem? You're going to print more money again. It's like the minimum wage. It's like increasing minimum wage on steroids. That's what this is by giving people a universal basic income. Except here's the issue. You did it once through the pandemic, but the whole world had a bad economic time. So we didn't really see the big devaluation of the Canadian currency. If you do this and keep printing and printing and printing and printing, what's going to happen is the value of the currency is going to diminish so much on the global scale that then people are going to start shipping out all the goods in Canada. No one's going to want to sell them here anymore. You're going to absolutely kamikaze the economy. This country will fall apart.
Well, it's hyperinflation, right? Like, look what's happening in Turkey. I was met with somebody the other day, and they left a couple of years ago. They were saying their inflation was up 150%.
Yeah, look at Argentina.
Well, Argentina was in the thousands. Like,
yeah, it's insane.
There's a study that's a good book, When Money Destroys Nations. It's an economic study on the economy in Zimbabwe. I have it at home. I read it, and it's all about the bad policies that come when this is happening. And it is usually more money printing, higher inflation, and higher inflation, and it just until the currency collapses, basically. My only pushback would be that when we take this stance against someone, let's just, since we were talking about him, Trudeau, that's my issue, because we've interviewed members of the Conservative Party, high up members, and they've said, you could go back and watch the interview, and they've said that some sort of universal basic income will be needed, and they support that. And so what does that look like? Some sort of version of it? I don't know, because it's not implemented yet. But my point is that it may not necessarily be one person, one party that's kind of driving it into the ground. It could certainly be members of the other party. It could be a group of people. And case in point, when you look at our neighbors to the south, a lot of people that are trying to stop Trump from running are members of his own party.
For sure.
Right? So it's like this. I never, why am I pushing back? I mean, we talk in private, you know how I feel and stuff, but why am I pushing back? Like, for our audiences, I really dislike the polarization of, politics and then political issues. And then as a result, most people not educated people where we can have this conversation. Everyday people I'm talking, the sheep that I'm talking, right? Not only can you not talk to them, you're their enemy. That's what I want to avoid, because I think repairing maybe the country, repairing a lot of shit that's wrong right now is going to take collaboration and community. We're missing that.
I agree. I think I agree. I think the division is a big problem we have here in Canada. Unfortunately, that's the system they've created in general. You know what I mean? And I think that it's become so big, the only way it crashes if it falls under its own weight. I don't know how we remedy this. I don't know that you and I will ever see this in our lifetime. I just don't know. It's just so out of control. It's so big and so bureaucratic and such a mess. I don't know how you break it apart. So many Canadians work for the government. It's just crazy. Like, what do you do? So that's kind of its own thing. To your point about the UBI and through the Conservative government. So there's two things I'd point out. Trudeau is responsible for putting the economy in this situation. That is his fault. He has made this country untenable with the increase in groceries over 300%, with the increase in rent over 100%, with the increase of the cost of homes around 100%. It's unaffordable. By putting things in like the carbon tax, by adding all these extra things, these pharmacare bills, all this other crap, that is Trudeau. He's making life unaffordable. That's exactly who it is. I don't care. This was never a problem up till now. Our national debt more than doubled. This is on this man. That's who it is. Now, he's the fall guy. I'm not saying that the Conservatives won't support this. Now, here's why they might, though, because how do you remedy the situation otherwise? Now, there's a couple ways you could do this. One is you could start using Canada's resources. We have enough natural gas in this country to provide natural gas for the world for over 200 years. I was just learning about this yesterday. The trillions of tons that we have here in natural gas, we would be a absolute powerhouse financially if we would tap into that resource. So start using Canada's resources again, like the lumber. We've got so many great resources, the mining. We just don't do it because we have to watch out for this green agenda that's in front of our faces. So the easier solution is, oh, they'll just print money. That's an easier one. That's why you get conservatives supporting this. That's a lazy ass answer. And I'd give them shit too, because it is the wrong thing to do. What they're doing is this. The conservatives are doing the same thing the liberals are, who are in this seat having this conversation. They're going, well, what do I want? I want control over the people, because that's what government is. They want to maintain their power and have control over the people. That's just what the system has continued to do more and more and more. So there's no real denying it. No matter whether people want to say it's a tinfoil hat or not, it's actually just objective truth. So when people in the conservative government are also supporting this, they're doing it for two things. They're probably going, well, the economy's so bad, it's just the best solution. Well, no, it's not. I just gave you a better one. So the reason you are doing it is because you want to maintain control, just like the liberal government does. I don't think any government is good. I'm a libertarian at heart. That's exactly who I am. But if you have to pick the lesser of two evils, I think right now the conservatives are the better option. Unfortunately, if Trudeau does implement a UBI, the only way the conservatives have a chance to win, in my opinion, is if they support it in some fashion once it's in. That's what I think.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's all about the policies, like we just said. Like, nobody wants to be left holding the bag. And that's what you're saying and what you're leading to, because going back to this study, that's as far as I've gone into this. It was a very, very detailed study. They could have prevented, from it going from bad to worse.
100%.
But in order for them to have prevented the extreme, they did have to go from bad to a little bit worse, but then it would improve. And they didn't want to do that because that little moment in time where, the economy would really, really hurt now, everyone would start to feel it even more, and they want to go back now and fix it. So I guess what I'm saying is that nobody wants to be left holding the bag. So it's always going to be about the lesser of two evils. And I think we just have to, like, what you're trying to push back against, correct me if I'm wrong, is that it doesn't get to the point where you can't repair it and it just cycles and gets worse and worse. You're not trying to get to that point. And you want to be a voice for that.
Well, I think we do have solutions that we could apply to fix this problem. Yeah, I've just identified them.
What can Canadians do right now?
Like I just said, we should be leveraging our natural resources. Like, they're just giving a bunch of subsidies right now for all these green energy stuff, all these battery plants. They just give it to 2 foreign companies. They're going, hey, we need to change the grocery competition in the world. They go and start calling foreign companies. Why don't you stimulate like national growth? Why don't you tell people in Canada, hey, we're going to subsidize this for you so you can start a small chain of grocers so that Canadians can do well? Like, dude, we're not doing anything for the people of Canada, and that's the government. That's on the government. That is their fault. So right now, I mean, that is the easiest way. From a macro perspective, from a federal level, you have to start leveraging your resources. That is the only way, in my opinion, you get out of this mess. The other thing that the government needs to do is, holy Christ, they need to curb spending. This is insane. Do you know that the government has been, like Scotiabank, I think it was Scotiabank that printed this report. They said that government spending, above and beyond the standard level of government spending, is responsible for 2 points of our interest right now. Like that 2% of our interest. So what's our interest at right now?
7.
Yeah. So that's what's it coming out of that? What's the Fed rate though? 5? It's fixed to 5. I think it's fixed to 5, right? Yeah. So they're saying it would only be 3 if the government had their spending under control. Do you know that the federal government, direct federal government employees have gone up 40% since Trudeau's been in power from 2015 to 2023? It went from 257,000 to 357,000 people. We don't, for what improved? What improved in the federal infrastructure to justify any of this? It doesn't make any sense. So you need to curb government spending. You need to shrink the size of it. You need to cut all this bureaucratic nonsense, and you need to start leveraging our resources. That's how you fix Canada today.
But what about on the micro level? What should Canadians do right now?
Subscribe to Blender Media.
Yeah. I mean, it can feel daunting and challenging right now because you're in this sort of holding pattern as a Canadian where even if you make $100,000 a year, you can barely afford to live. That's just the truth. It feels a little hopeless right now. I think there are times when life is not that easy to make substantial change or progress. And what you have to do in those times, or here's what I do. I try to educate myself more and I try to become more self-sufficient. And I know this isn't going to apply to everybody, but, Meg and I are moving up north. We're going to start farming. We're going to have chickens. We're going to start being a little more self-sustainable. We're going to start doing those things. We're going to learn those skills because that's what we can do now. We're trying to improve our value because right now for most people, you're in a position where you need to hang on tight and you need to weather this storm. So now's not the time to go, attack. Now's the time to make sure that you can stay safe. And in that time, I just think it's better to, kind of improve your own personal value to the world and what you can do for yourself and others around you. And then once this storm sort of quells, that's when you go on the attack. So now would be your time to sort of plan and just maintain stability. And I hate to say that, like I wish there was more. You know what, I will say this. that is definitely a thing that most people can do, and I think will serve them well over the next couple of years. Because I think this economic storm is going to be at least 2-3 more years. You can tell me if you feel differently. But for other people, or what else people can do is they can get up and they can actually push back. Everyone's got a voice. And I know it doesn't seem like much, and I know it seems like you might ostracize yourself or lose some friends or whatever. But the thing is, if you stay silent, that's when the problems happen. It's because we don't push back. It's because we don't have these conversations. So I think that's another big thing that people can do. You can start trying to educate and just inform people and just have conversations with people about what's going on, because we do need to push back and we do need a collective effort, or this will continue going down the wrong path.
I agree.
I agree. For sure.
So they can find you at It's Jonathan Harvey. And then how do they subscribe to your newsletter?
So if you want to find Blender, we're at Blender News. That's BLENDR News. That's all of our social handles. The reason I did Blender without the second E was so that I could get all the social handles and get the website. If you want to subscribe to our daily newsletter, it's 6 days a week. I'm still writing it. It is bananas. It takes so much work. It's at, like I said, blendrnews.com, and you can subscribe to the newsletter, or, find our podcast on Spotify, YouTube, whatever floats your boat. Just be good to have you there.
And if you want to liberate Canada, make sure to share this pod with anybody that you know, friends or family. Guys, we all got to speak up, like Jonathan was just saying. We all have a voice. Let's make it heard. And anything else you want to leave them with?
No, I appreciate you guys if you listened all the way to the end, and appreciate you coming on the show again. Yeah, appreciate you. Until next time, guys, we're out.